Welcome into the show. You're watching Philadelphia Eagles Now. Chase Senior here with you. And as always, no matter where you are or how you're tuned in, thank you so much for making today's show a part of your day. And coming up, a huge game in the NFC on Monday Night Football as the Philadelphia Eagles hit the road to play the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. This game kicking off Monday night, November 10th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern, Lambeau Field, Green Bay, Wisconsin, of course. Philadelphia coming off that bye week. And prior to the bye, they put together two really good performances on both sides of the ball. The Packers in this game, coming off a loss last week to the Carolina Panthers at home, are 2-point favorites. We as Eagles fans, we always love when the Birds are pinned as underdogs. That's our mentality as a city. The over-under, 45 even. Before we dive into this preview, it's going to be so informative for all of you, whether you're an Eagles fan or you're a Packers fan. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for daily coverage of the Birds, but also we'll be live on Monday night for a watch party, the best place to experience an Eagles game day outside of being at the actual game. We're going to do a longer pregame show since it's a primetime huge matchup, so we'll be live at 7 p.m. Eastern. Don't forget to hit that bell icon as well and turn on your notifications by hitting all. Therefore, anytime I publish a video like this, anytime we do go live, you will be notified. Eagles-Packers has become a pretty sneaky good rivalry inside the NFC, even though obviously these two teams are not divisional foes. And this is something that has developed over the last couple of years, especially the heated moments that these two teams had during the 2024 season. Week 1 in Brazil, Philadelphia able to beat the Green Bay Packers 34-29. The Eagles had 2 turnovers on the first 2 drives of that game. Then the offense kind of came alive. In the wild card round, the Birds at Lincoln Financial Field beating Green Bay 22-10. Philadelphia really dominated that game. They forced Jordan Love into multiple turnovers. That game was a little bit too close for the Eagles' liking because the offense struggled a little bit. Dallas Goedert did have that legendary angry run. Then the Eagles able to hold off Green Bay as that game wore on. Of course, this past offseason, the Packers proposed that ban for the tush push. They didn't want that play to be legal any longer, and so Eagles fans took note of that. These fan bases on social media, in particular on X, formerly known as Twitter, they've engaged in a lot of smack talk. And going into this Week 10 tilt, these are two teams who are looked at as Super Bowl contenders, as NFC contenders. And so Philadelphia, Green Bay vying for a top spot in the NFC. This will be the first time that Jalen Hurts plays at Lambeau Field since really the Jalen Hurts era got underway. Back in 2020, final year for Doug Peterson, final year for Carson Wentz, he was really struggling. That Eagles team was awful. And so during that game, which was really weird because that was during the COVID season when no fans were allowed at games, so it was silent during this game. Wentz was bad. Jalen Hurts came in. He went 5 of 12 for 109 yards, a long touchdown pass in that game, made some plays with his legs, made some really nice throws. And then from there on out, the Eagles gave him starts to see if he could be the future franchise quarterback. Of course, Sirianni hired going into 2021, and Hurts has been the starter since, and he's gone on to finish runner-up in MVP voting in 2022, 2 Super Bowls over the last 3 years, and of course in February, won the Super Bowl against Kansas City and won Super Bowl MVP. But the start of the Hurts era really started with this game all the way back in Week 13 of 2020, and Jalen Hurts at that point was rocking the number 2. Now he's in that icy number 1. The Packers so far this season, they've been really good when they've been hot. They've had some weird, mysterious, very odd and wacky losses. Week 1, they began the season with a highly impressive victory over the Detroit Lions. They beat them badly, 27-13 at home. Then on Thursday night, short week, they dominated the Washington Commanders 27-18. That was a Commanders team that made it to the NFC Championship game last year and the number 1 seeded Lions. So 2 highly impressive wins to start the year. Obviously, the Commanders have started to get off track with all these injuries and not playing well. But then in Week 3, after everybody was like, this is the Packers' year, they're Super Bowl favorites, they lost on the road against a bad, awful Cleveland Browns team 13-10, and they only scored 10 points. Now, that Browns defense is legit, but that Packers offense was flying high going into week 3. Week 4, they tie the Dallas Cowboys in overtime 40-40. They have their bye week in week 5. They come out of the bye. They beat the Bengals 27-18. Barely hold on to beat the Cardinals. Had to come back in that game 27-23. And then Jordan Love, 2 games ago, was flawless. And when he's feeling it, he looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. In that game against Pittsburgh, he completed, 20 straight passes in that game? And that was another really impressive victory for Green Bay, 35-25 over another quality opponent. But then they come back home last week. They're bad in the red zone. Love was up and down. Their run defense was awful. And they lose to Carolina on a last-second field goal, 16-13. And so when I scout Green Bay, when they're on, they look like one of the premier teams in the NFL. But on offense, there is a lack of identity under Matt LaFleur. He is from this Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay type of tree. And obviously he wants to run the ball first, but they've struggled a little bit maintaining consistency there. Throwing the ball, they've been a Jekyll and Hyde team. On defense, I do like what they've done, and obviously trading for Micah Parsons prior to the year has boosted Jeff Hafley's defense, and Hafley is a really good defensive coordinator. On the other sideline, the Eagles so far, coming out of the bye week, let's give you a refresher. Week 1, they beat the Dallas Cowboys 24-20. Week 2, they go on the road. They beat the Kansas City Chiefs by 3. Week 3, they score 29 unanswered, 29 unanswered points, I think it was. Either way, they went down early, or 19 unanswered points. Either way, they had that wild comeback win against the Rams, 33-26. The walk-off blocked field goal, scoop and score for the big boy, Jordan Davis. Week 4, they go on the road. They had that flawless first half, bad in the second half. They beat the Buccaneers 31-25. Then they give up 19 unanswered points to the Denver Broncos in the fourth quarter alone and drop that one for the first loss of the year, 21-17. Week 6, they fall to the Giants on Thursday Night Football in an embarrassing loss, 34-17. Then they flush those back-to-back defeats, and they go into the bye week with 2 very sound victories. 28-22 over the Vikings on the road, and then 38-20 over the Giants, their best and most complete performance in all 3 phases of the season. And so in scouting the Eagles, I think the last 2 games with those 2 victories, they started to find a groove, especially on offense, and they've been led by Jalen Hurts. On defense, they've started to catch their stride, and they've put together performances that have lasted for an entire duration of the 60-minute ball game. I do think all year the defense at times has been able to bail the offense out when the offense has grown stagnant. The big question coming out of the bye week, can week 7 and week 8, and with what the Eagles did in those games, propel the Eagles for the rest of the way? Of course, during the bye week as well, Eagles general manager Howie Roseman was very busy. He made 3 trades leading into the NFL trade deadline and during that bye week. He traded for slot corner Michael Carter, who Howie said has been elite in the slot, but can also play safety. I wonder if Vic Fangio uses him there. Made the trade for Jair Alexander to get a veteran presence and a former All-Pro in there at outside corner. Obviously, Alexander became a 2-time second-team All-Pro and a terrific player for the Green Bay Packers, so he gets to go up against his former team. And then on Monday morning, day before the deadline, Howie, another swing. Trades for edge rusher Jalen Phillips, who thrived under Vic Fangio back in 2023, and he reunites with this former defensive coordinator who he played his best ball under. To the injury report for both squads, the practice window has been open for Nolan Smith, re-injured that triceps that he tore in the Super Bowl, so he's eligible to play in this game against Green Bay. Of note, I'm recording this on Wednesday. We'll get more clarity on the injury front as the week progresses. Jacorian Bennett also going to be eligible to play if he's ready with that pectoral injury. He was a full participant in the final 2 practices going into that Giants game prior to the bye. We'll see what the status is of Cam Jurgens with that knee injury. Got to give credit where credit is due. Brett Toth played really well against New York. A.J. Brown missed that Giants game with the hamstring injury. Adoree Jackson was out because of a concussion that he suffered against Minnesota. He does have one of the highest tight window throw rates among all corners in the NFL, but I think his play's been a little bit up and down. And then Brandon Graham, not injured, but coming out of retirement. He, too, is eligible to play against Green Bay for Vic Fangio's defense as well. Packers injury news. Brutal loss to a sensational player. Their all-world tight end, Tucker Kraft, tore his ACL in that loss against Carolina. Matthew Golden's shoulder injury, might be able to play in this game. Same can be said for Colby Wooden, the interior defensive lineman who got a lot of praise from Micah Parsons. Aaron Banks, he was a big signing for Green Bay in free agency to kind of improve that offensive line. His first season with the Packers has been hampered by a lot of injuries. He got injured in that game against Carolina. Nate Hobbs dealing with an MCL injury. Dontavian Wicks hasn't played the last couple of weeks due to a calf. Same can be said for Lucas Van Ness' foot. And then Jaden Reed still on IR. His practice window might not be open this week, but he's been working with Packers trainers over the last couple of weeks. You think we're done with our preview? No chance. We're only getting started and beginning to take flight. Coming up next, my keys to the game, matchups to watch, what the Eagles must do to beat the Green Bay Packers. That's all coming up right around the corner. But first, let's get to our sponsor, our friends at Chubby's, making our Eagles-Packers preview possible. I love all of their clothing items, whether it's a swimsuit, pants, shorts, a polo, a regular shirt. I just love what Chubby's has to offer. And for all of the real ones out there, you can get 20% off when you use the code CHATSPORTS. So I've been wearing everything from their flannel overshirt to the NFL Chubby's collection, the swimsuits during the summer season. Obviously, it's a fantastic item to wear as well. Fellas, if you want to look sharp when you meet the big family this holiday, you've got to check out our friends over at Chubby's. From family dinners to holiday parties, Chubby's has you covered, so you can focus on being yourself and letting the good vibes roll. Their stuff is so comfortable, it should come with a warning label. As the temperatures start to drop and the weather gets a little bit grim, their flannels, pullovers, quarter zips will keep you warm, but also stylish and ready for any type of occasion. From freezing your tail off at the football game and tailgates to crushing donuts at the pumpkin patch to holding court around the bonfire, going out on a date with your significant other. This holiday season, spread cheer and, of course, a little bit of drip with Chubby's. Perfect for upgrading your own winter rotation or gifting to somebody who already has everything. So here's the deal. For a limited time, Chubby's is giving our listeners 20% off your purchase at chubbyshorts.com/chatsports. That's chubbyshorts.com/chatsports. If it's Black Friday, you can skip the code, but still take advantage of even bigger markdowns during their exclusive Black Friday sale. Just head to chubbyshorts.com/chatsports. Use that code chatsports. Make sure to support our show and tell them that Philadelphia Eagles Now and Chat Sports sent you. All right, to the back half of the show, the meat and potatoes of our preview here. Coming up here on Philadelphia Eagles Now, Chase Senior here with you. What an awesome matchup we have in Week 10 on Monday Night Football, prime time between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Green Bay Packers. I'm going to give you my keys to the game, top matchups to watch, what the Eagles must do to beat Green Bay to stay atop the NFC, and of course, I'll give you my prediction. And then speaking of the NFC playoff picture, the Eagles had one of the best bye weeks that you could ever have. They didn't play a game, but they moved into the number one spot in the conference because the Packers lost at home to the Carolina Panthers. The Detroit Lions lost at home to the Minnesota Vikings. And then every other team inside the NFC East also lost, and that did the Eagles favors. And so their NFC record right now is 5-1. They're 6-2 on the year, number one spot in the NFC. And you think about where they are right now. They've beaten the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and so they're ahead of them in the NFC playoff picture. They have a much better record than the Seahawks inside the NFC. They've got an opportunity to beat Green Bay here to earn that tiebreaker. They already beat the Rams, and then they play the Lions next week in Week 11. And in this game, between the Eagles and the Packers, given everything that is at stake, the importance of it, the magnitude of it, and the fact that these two teams look at each other as NFC rivals. This is going to have a playoff vibe, a playoff intensity, and playoff physicality to it. And they don't call it the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field for nothing. It might be the early portion, mid portion of November, but when you go up to Green Bay, Wisconsin, in the latter months of the season, you can expect the weather to be pretty chilly. And at night, on Monday Night Football, it's expected to have a low of 25 degrees with a real field temperature of 17 degrees. Now, as of right now, as I'm recording this preview on Wednesday, no precipitation in the forecast, so no snow expected. Probability of thunderstorms, as you see, nothing. Wind gusts, though, up to 22 miles per hour. So the weather could play a factor in this football game, and it's going to have that playoff, real football type of feel to it. How the Packers stack up on both sides of the ball. First on offense, an up and down season for Green Bay. At times they've looked dominant. At other times they've fallen flat on their faces and they can't really get anything going, whether it be through the air, on the ground, or finishing in the red zone. But the numbers, as far as the totality of their 2025 season, pretty good across the board on both sides of the pill. 11th in points per game at 25.8, 8th in yards per game at 360.4, 5th in yards per play at 5.9. They are the second best third down offense in the NFL, moving the chains at a 49% clip. They're 11th in the red zone at 62.8%. The inability to capitalize in the red zone, a big issue against Carolina last week. On defense, 8th in points per game, led by Micah Parsons at 20.8. 5th in yards per game at 286.4. 2nd in yards per play at 4.6. So they haven't given up a lot of chunk plays and explosives this year. The third down defense is good, a conversion rate of 34.6%. They have struggled a little bit in the red zone, 63.6% red zone touchdown scoring percentage for the opposition. That's 23rd in the NFL defensively for Green Bay. How the Eagles stack up. They've certainly inflated some of their offensive numbers with what they did in the 2 weeks prior to the bye week. They're 10th in points per game at 26, still 24th in yards per game at 304.4, 17th in yards per play at 5.3, although we've seen more explosives the last couple of games. 28th on third downs. That has to get better. 33.3% is very low, but the positive spin, still the best red zone offense in the NFL. Once they get in the 20, they're scoring a touchdown 85% of the time. On defense, 19th in points per game, 23rd in yards per game, 16th in yards per play, 26 on third downs, but once again, really good in the red zone, that bend but don't break type of mentality and results for Vic Fangio's unit. My keys to the game and top matchups to watch. A big question for Green Bay going into this one. How do the Packers and their offense adjust without Tucker Kraft? He was making some noise, maybe solidifying himself as the best tight end in the National Football League. He tore his ACL last week against the Carolina Panthers. You certainly hate to see that, especially with such a special player who's a dominant force physically. And what he's able to do as a blocker and a pass catcher, he was putting together an awesome season. 44 targets, 32 catches, 489 receiving yards, and average yards per catch of 15.3. So on those seam balls, those balls down the number, or just picking up yak, he was so dynamic. And in the red zone, he was also incredible. 6 receiving touchdowns on the year. An awful loss for this Packers offense and a very difficult player to replace. And so you look at this Eagles off-ball linebacker rotation, the players who are going to be tasked with covering Tucker Kraft, in addition to Cooper DeJean out of the slot, Zach Bond, Nakobe Dean, Jihad Campbell. And you look at these 3 players on your screen here, we'll see what Vic Fangio does with them. Nakobe Dean has gotten more snaps the last 2 games. He's played really well, and he's really good against the run. Because the Eagles were so thin at edge rusher, Jihad Campbell was being used more so as a pass rusher, not as an off-ball linebacker. And his snaps, because of that, have gone down a little bit because he's one of the smallest edge rushers in the game, if that were his primary position. And so interested to see coming out of the bye how Vic Fangio uses his off-ball linebackers as far as the snap count. Key to the game number 2, got to see this Eagles offense stay in their bag. Because in the 2 victories prior to the bye week, on the road against Minnesota, one of the top defenses in the NFL, and at home against the Giants, they were on fire. And you hope that this Eagles offense has found something. Most importantly, that they found their identity. That's been an issue with the Packers all year, an inability to find their offensive identity. The Eagles offense against New York, 427 total yards. Jalen Hurts threw for 179 yards through the air, but 4 touchdowns, no picks. He was highly efficient in that game. The Eagles had finally a breakout rushing performance on the ground, running for 276 yards on the ground on 33 attempts. Saquon Barkley had that 65-yard rushing touchdown. Tank Bigsby was also awesome. They picked up 22 first downs, did give up 4 sacks, but the Giants' defensive front is very good. And the key to those 2 wins prior to the bye, no turnovers in each of them. Against the Vikings, this was a pass-happy Eagles offensive attack led by Jalen Hurts. 361 yards of total offense, 326 of them through the air. Hurts was incredible. 19 of 26, 3 tuds, no picks. They only had 45 rushing yards, 13 first downs, did give up 3 sacks, and then the big number again, 0 turnovers. And going into the bye, this is where Hurts' numbers were. And I think that he should continue to be in the MVP conversation. He has 20 touchdowns and 2 total turnovers this year. He has the most touchdowns in the National Football League, or at least did going into the bye. Tied for 3rd in passing touchdowns and passer rating. Tied for the most wins in the NFC going into the bye. And was 5th in completion rate at 70.2%. Key to the game number 3. If you can bother Jordan Love early, it really impacts him for the rest of the game. If he's able to find a groove, find a rhythm, and get his confidence early in the game, he starts to sling it around, has no fear with the way in which he plays. He's very decisive. And with his arm talent, he looks like one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. But if you hit him, if you sack him, if he's under duress, you can force him into bad decisions and turnovers. And then you start to see his confidence kind of dwindle and fall apart a little bit. Now, this year, he's been really good as far as his overall numbers. He's completing nearly 71% of his passes. He's thrown for more than 2,000 yards, 13 touchdowns, 3 picks, and a quarterback rating of 107.9. But in his career, he has struggled against Philadelphia. Why? Because they've put him under siege, and they forced him into a lot of mistakes. He's 1-2 against the Eagles. This year, as I just mentioned, he's completing just shy of 71% of his passes. 3 games against the Eagles, he's completing 56.6% of his throws. He's thrown for 585 yards in those 3 games, 3 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Key to the game number 4, which Green Bay run defense shows up? All year, they've been pretty good against the run. But as I'm about to talk about, against Carolina and Rico Dowdle, they were bad, and they got shellacked. Yards per rush this season for Jeff Hafley's unit, 4 yards per carry. That's 9th best in the NFL. Rushing yards per game, 89.4. That ranks number 5 among the 32 teams. And teams are running it a decent amount, 22.6. In games where Saquon this year has 15 or more carries, the Eagles are undefeated. And so that's an important number for the Eagles to get to and to find success on the ground. And did the Packers' rushing defense get exposed by Carolina and Dave Canales, who's a really good offensive mind, the head coach for Carolina? Rico Dowdle ran wild. And he also ran wild against the Cowboys. So he's been on a little bit of a heater of late. 25 carries for $130, 5.2 yards per carry, and 2 rushing touchdowns. And of course, the Eagles in Week 8 prior to the Week 9 bye, they ran for nearly 300 yards against New York. Now, the Giants do have one of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL, but an issue all year for this Eagles offense, an inability and a lack of executing. Offensive linemen missing blocks, wide receivers not really blocking downfield. I thought the execution, upon looking at the tape against New York, was really good. And Saquon ran wild, best game of the year, 14 carries for 150 yards, 10.7 yards per tote, 2 total touchdowns. And then Tank Bigsby, 9 carries for 104 yards, 11.6 yards per carry. And I love the physical element that he brings that Eagles backfield. with it being cold, a real field temperature of about 17 degrees, obviously establishing the run, finding success on the ground, going to be important for Philadelphia in this one. And then something to monitor here in this game. How do these new pieces get incorporated for the Eagles? Yes, they traded for Michael Carter prior to the bye and Jair Alexander a day before their official bye. They trade for Jalen Phillips on Monday as Howie Roseman got ahead of everybody, as he often does with contract extensions. He did that with the big trade, making that splash on Monday morning. But how often do these players play? Do they play a lot? What is their snap count? What is their usage? What are their roles in this Eagles defense? Michael Carter, elite play in the slot, and he can play a little bit of safety. He's not going to play on the outside. He shouldn't play on the outside. 85% of his career snaps have been in the slot. For Jair Alexander, he only played a couple of games with Baltimore. Gave up 5 catches on 5 targets for more than 100 yards. Isn't the same player physically. Had a bad PCL injury last year. How does he fare against his former team? At the very least, he can give you intel as far as what to expect from Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love. And then Jalen Phillips, this is a little bit easier to incorporate an edge rusher. One, you just tell him, hey, pin your ears back on an obvious passing down and get after the quarterback. Obviously on rundowns, set the edge and be disciplined with your rush and contain that rusher inside the tackle box. Or just make plays if you need to get out to the perimeter. Obviously in the secondary, it's more complex because there are more nuances in a passing play with your coverage scheme, with what transpires during the course of a play. And for Phillips, of course, he has familiarity with Vic Fangio's defense. So that's something that I'm going to be watching for. How much do Carter, Alexander, and Phillips play? What are their roles? And what type of impact can they have during this stretch run and in this game against Green Bay? So without further ado, predict the score. Eagles, Packers. Who you got in this football game, and what is your score prediction? I think these two teams are evenly matched. I think this game is going to come down to the wire. I think these two ball clubs are going to exchange punches all night long because I look at these two teams as two of the best teams in the NFL and in the NFC. At the end of the day, though, the Eagles have fared well against Green Bay. I like how their physicality matches up against the Packers. I like their big game experience a little bit better. Plus, they have the rest advantage coming off of the bye. Give me the Birds 28-25. Philadelphia picks up a huge win, and they stay in that number 1 spot in the NFC.